of the story of Senator, blocked on his name, Senator Clark, and his wife, two daughters, and the hilltop home in Montecito, which was the subject of books, or was it Empty Mansions or Haunted Mansions or whatever. Anyway, we're going to get a docent view of the experience of so-called Bellosguardo, that home, which, by the way, means beautiful view in Italian. And to give it, two people you know very well. Class of 2018, Brian Sarvis, who has talked to us about San Miguel Island. You know, school administrator in Santa Barbara. You know his background. And Dennis Whalen, who's only been with us as a docent since 24, but you know, was the university architect and you know, well known to us. So we're in good hands as we go through the adventure. By the way, two other docents are also docents at Bellosguardo, Tom Jevons and Thomas Reynolds. So we're well represented at Bellosguardo. So we turn it over to them.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Brian. We've asked Thomas Reynolds to join us as well. A number of us are docents at Bellosguardo. And the estate has a beautiful beach house. It's 30,000 square feet. It's on 23.5 acres. It has 1,000 feet of beach frontage. It's tucked up right against the city limits on the cemetery side. It's right across from the zoo. You know, a lot of people I talk to say, what place? I go, well, you know where the beach volleyball courts are? That's the place. And it has an amazing view. Well, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to give you a virtual tour of the estate or the house. We will talk to you about that, but I'm going to give you a tour that's really based on the background, sort of a chronology of how we got this estate, things leading to it. And what I want to do is to inspire you to go online, give them your email, and be invited to come down and take a tour. It'll cost you $100, but this is not the Breakers Mansion. This is but a small beach house at only 30,000 square feet, built for two. Oh, and their entourage of staff. This is the man, William Andrews Clark. He was born in 1839. Imagine where that is in American history. Just 10 years later, all of America got gold fever, and a couple 100,000 people went to California in the gold rush. He was born 22 years before the Civil War. Well, he got gold fever as well. There are a lot of things I won't tell you about him because he was such a dynamo of energy involved in so many different things. Let me just tell you, he followed the gold fields to Colorado, and then he followed the rumors up to the gold fields in Butte, Montana, up in that area. Now, Butte is up in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. It's pretty close to the Continental Divide. He quickly discovered that it was much more lucrative to provide supplies to the other miners. And he could do things like buy eggs, flour, tobacco, even fruit, carry them up over the mountains, sell them in the Butte area among the miners for 5 times, 10 times, 15 times as much as he paid for them, even though the eggs may have frozen on the way over the mountain. He was involved in so many different activities. He would have contracts to carry the mail. He developed sort of a Pony Express system to carry the mail over as far as Walla Walla, Washington. He would assay gold. he would start to loan money to the miners. He would start a mercantile. He'd open a store, sell all of his goods, close the store, go get more supplies, sell those supplies. He started a nationally recognized bank. He would buy up old mining claims. He would foreclose on claims of miners that couldn't repay him. Underneath those gold veins were silver and copper veins. And the silver wasn't so much, but these copper veins were sometimes 50 feet wide. He didn't know much about smelting copper and refining copper. So he uprooted his entire family. He dropped the kids off back in Pennsylvania with the relatives. He and his wife at the time, Kate Stauffer, went to New York, Columbia School of Mines. He learned how to smelt and refine copper, came back to Butte. He worked 4 mines there. Now, this is back in the days when copper mining was through digging down into the earth. You dug tunnels into the earth to extract the copper. It wasn't the open pit mining that you see today. But at that point, he was rich. Let's go to the next one. And Butte, Montana was quickly known as a place that didn't have a single living tree. If you know anything about copper mining, it's pretty caustic stuff. Well, he was involved in so many activities, so many business ventures. He had newspapers, he had trolleys, he had various ranches, he had cattle, he had timber, he had a coffee plantation. He had sugar beets that were being harvested down in the Long Beach area. He was doing so many things in addition to his banking, in addition to his power plants. He was the one who had the controlling interest in, yeah, let's go back to the Jerome, Arizona, in the United Verde mine. This was the biggest producing mine in the world. And he owned 95, 99% of the stock in that mine. Back then, you remember when well, you may not remember this. I probably do. Transcontinental Railroad ran across to the big city, San Francisco. And then it came down right through our town in the 1870s to this sleepy little place called Los Angeles. Well, there was no train line between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. He built that train line. And along the way was a little Mormon camp that could be used as a depot for water and fuel for his engines. He bought land around that camp along a street called Fremont Street, and it developed into a town you may have heard of called Las Vegas in Clark County, Nevada. That was a big deal. He had railroad rights. This is not a family who ever flew. You know, they went on the big luxury liners. They ran on railroads across the country, and he would zip back and forth doing just about everything. Now, he had enough money that he could travel in Europe. And Tom, let's see, he could buy up. He had works by Rembrandt, by Degas, by Renoir. He had Titian, Van Hoyens. He had a lot of art, very good art, rather eclectic display of it. And let's look at the next one. He was married to Kate Stauffer for 24 years. They had 7 children, 4 of whom outlived him. Now, Kate would do a lot of her own traveling. One of the things she wanted to do was go to the Columbian Exposition. We call it a World's Fair today. Back then in Chicago in 1893 was the 400th anniversary of Columbus coming to the New World. You may not remember, we used to celebrate Columbus coming and discovering the New World. It's not such a thing anymore, but here we are in the White City. It's going to be very safe. She would contract typhus and she would die of typhoid fever. Just a couple of years later, here's W.A. Clark, William Andrews Clark, back in Butte, Montana, and there's a 4th of July celebration in town. And in the celebration is a 15, 16-year-old girl dressed as Lady Liberty. Now, he did for a couple of kids in town, Anna LaChapelle being one of them. He would finance their continuing education. These are girls who had interest in performing, interest in music, finance their education at a girls' academy there in the area. And then, in the case of Anna, he sent her over to Paris to live with the sister he had set up in Paris, along with her children. Now, at about this point in his time, in his life, he wanted a title. You go around Europe, you've got marquises and dukes just about everywhere in Europe. Well, the best title he could come up with was, let's go back to that one, was senator. Now, amid substantial allegations of bribery, Mr. Jevons, you see this envelope. It has 10 $1,000 bills in it. I'm going to seal this, and I'd like you to put your initials on it. And after the vote, this is at a time when senators were elected by the legislatures in each state. Then I'll be handing it over to you. Now, Mr. Jevons would, of course, turn that down, but 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 not everyone did. He was elected, and before he was seated, it was such an issue that he resigned. His son said, either the old man is going to run out of money, or we're going to get elected. Uh, and he would later be reputed to have said, "I never bought a man who wasn't for sale." They went about it more discreetly at a later point, and he was elected senator and served for a term in the early 1900s, I think 1901 through 1907. But at about that point, he shocked the world, and especially his older children, all of whom were older than Anna LaChapelle, by telling them, oh, by the way, this is 1903. By the way, in 1901, Anna and I were married back in Europe. We already have a daughter who's going to be turning one soon. Now, his own newspaper didn't believe the story, but the New York paper believed the story. And let's go back to the New York, because what it says down here was it caused a minor social scandal, that he is 39 years older than his ward. They started calling her a ward, which she wasn't. Well, let's go on. Back in Butte, Montana, his papers reported it, and his competitor's paper also reported it a day later. Well, let's see where we're going here, Tom. Now, I have to tell you, Anna had lived in Paris for her entire 20s. And she didn't move back. She would come back and visit, but she didn't move back to the States until she was in her 30s. At that point in time, she was well versed in French literature, and she wrote in French. She spoke English with such a French accent that in New York, they didn't even know who she was. They didn't know she was Montana. They thought she was French, and people didn't have pictures of her. It's quite interesting, what an unknown she was when she came back, on the arm of what in 1907 was dubbed by the New York papers as the first or second richest man in America, second only to Rockefeller, Union Oil, the whole oil monopoly. And Tom, let's see where we're going from here. So here's their baby. This is the first daughter, Andre. And in the next picture, 4 years later, they have Andre's, 4-year-old. They have a new baby, and that is Huguette. And Huguette is a major player in our story here, and the reason that we ended up with Bellosguardo. So as they're going, through, yeah, go ahead. They would continue to travel in Europe. They would continue to collect art and go ahead. And he had other ambitions. And this was primarily to build the biggest, most ostentatious house in all of New York on Fifth Avenue, on Millionaires Row, right down from the Astors and the other big families. This house was 6 stories tall, Tom. It was 9 stories with the tower. It was sort of a Beaux Art design. It had 121 rooms. The dining room alone was 120,000, I'm sorry, 1,200 square feet in a dining room that could seat 75. It was beautifully built. It had a number of art galleries. And back then, in the early 1900s, art galleries looked like this. They didn't have a picture on the wall, blank wall space, another picture on the wall. They had art, and you were going to see it all. So it was in 2 or 3 rows. So the big national galleries looked like this as well. He would invite people in. He never made it to the Astor's 400 Club, the social register. He was a little too Montana for them, I'm sure. But he would invite people in to see his galleries. This house also had rooms that had hand carved wood paneling done in the early 1700s that were from chateaus in France or in Germany. Now, we're never sure quite what the source was, but they had built these into the house itself. And here, in fact, is take a look at that ceiling and take a look at all the plaster work on the walls and the giant lions beside. This is the dining room. So, Tom, she finally came back to America and brought her 2 little girls, one 7 years old and the other 4 years old. The house wasn't even ready until 1912, so they spent time at the big house that he had built back in Butte, Montana. And go ahead, uh, and go ahead from that. They would continue to travel. In fact, the girls lived a life of luxury. You know, they would play across the street in the snow in Grand Central Park. They'd run around in the house, much to their mother's chagrin. They'd climb up into the tower and they'd play various things. And the girls were very close. The older one would tell stories to the younger one with cliffhanger endings and finish them the next day. Here are the 2 girls that are 4 years apart. Go ahead, Tom. And and the two shared a bedroom in a 121 square foot, 121 room house. This house even had a railroad spur into the basement to bring in tons of coal to keep the house operating. Go ahead. Now, when Huguette, this is Huguette, turned 13, her parents were off traveling and they sent her a telegram telling her that since you're taking violin lessons, she was learning to play the piano and violin, we bought you the most wonderful instrument in the world. And Tom, that instrument is built by Antonio Stradivari. That is the Kreutzer. The Kreutzer sold, I think that one was just 10 years ago for $7.5 million. She would own another one that she particularly liked. She called it the Traveler. Later in her life, she was so generous to her caregiver that when her caregiver had a son who was starting to take violin lessons, she had her personal assistant go and get her Traveler, and she handed it off to the kid. They would own other instruments as well, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. The older daughter, Andre, met an unfortunate end. She developed a fever on a family trip to the North Woods in Maine. She died of meningitis just a week before her 17th birthday. Now, go ahead. That left then just this family of 3, W.A., Anna, and Huguette. Go ahead. Now, they went on vacation and they came out to Santa Barbara to a house that had been built by the William Graham family, flush with cash from Oklahoma oil. They built a beautiful, Beresford's article, by the way, on this is just great. You can look it up. Just a beautiful Italianate mansion done in gleaming white marble, and it was a showpiece. This place was featured. Local Flying A Studios did a number of movies in this mansion, and WA, with his eye toward business opportunities, saw this as a distressed property, and I've heard various numbers: 250,000, 300,000. In today's money, that would be something like $5.5 million. Well, $5.5 million is a steal for a mansion like this that is on a $100 million estate. So they bought the mansion in 1925 after visiting here for a month, and they would continue to use this, but just a year later, a little over a year later, back in New York, W.A. died, age 86, and he is buried in Forest Lawn in the Bronx. Oh, let me talk about, I'll go back to this other one. Yeah. Uh, he's buried in Forest Lawn in the Bronx, and Tom, Tom Jevons, went to get this picture. Now, Bill, where'd you go? That'd make a great field trip for our group. You know, we could go to Dumbo in the Bronx, and
It was an hour on the train just to get out there.
an hour on the train. Just yeah, good. So the family had this house. Let's go back to that last one. And here's an over. This is what a drone shot looks like back from the early 1920s. You can see the Beale estate far over, the Lillian Beale's place. They called it the Child's estate, and you can see on the right side here, you can see that Bellosguardo, the Italianate mansion, that it was in fact, um, as the two women, as Anna and her daughter Huguette were in mourning and visiting here during the summer of 1925, was hit by our earthquake. 1925 earthquake. It was damaged, but it wasn't in ruins. It was still very livable. In fact, Huguette would even get married there years later. But I wanted you to see this because back behind is that fetid marsh swamp, salt marsh, that has now been turned into, well, something of a lake until about August. And then it just doesn't have enough oxygen to survive until the rains. But Huguette would donate $50,000 to the Santa Barbara City, and it would be dredged. 3 islands would be built, and it would be named after her sister, after her deceased sister, Andre Clark Bird Refuge. And we have her to thank for it because along the boulevard, by the way, that wasn't Cabrillo, that was just the boulevard. That was the road to Los Angeles right there. But along the boulevard, they stipulated that there would be uh, no businesses, that there'd be no swimming or boating on the lake, that there would be no parking along the lake. And of course, that serviced the family well because it gave them the privacy, but it also served us very well because that's a rather nice walk right along the bird refuge named after Andre Clark. Okay, so WA has died. And before we get to this picture, something happened to that Bellosguardo estate, that Italianate mansion that you're going to want to hear about. We're going to get the architect's perspective on this, Dennis Whalen.
Thank you. I'm a little less extemporaneous than Brian, so I've prepared my text here. And we'll get Mr. Jevons to bring up the images. There it is. You'll notice that the architect is capitalized here in a bit of professional narcissism. We're always jealous of the other professionals, but as an architect and a bit of a historian, I have a keen and personal interest in the relationship between the architect and the client. Yep. Oh, yeah. Of his duties. So that relationship, I haven't been able to locate any sorts that gives the circumstance when Anna LaChapelle Clark first met architect Reginald Johnson. Perhaps it was socially, as Johnson cultivated a wealthy clientele, or perhaps they were introduced at the Biltmore, one of Johnson's works, or the Jefferson Estate, another one now, that's the Music Academy. What can be said with some confidence is that Reginald Johnson was already an established architect in Santa Barbara by 1910s and 1920s. He was known for his high-end residential work and distinguished by an unusually refined commandment of style, which allowed him to move fluidly between historical reference and restrained modern sensibility. This is a bit academic. Best known for his Spanish colonial revival and Mediterranean-inspired work in Southern California, Johnson combined careful study of European precedents with an acute sensitivity to site, light, and climate. His buildings are marked by balanced proportions, disciplined massing, and an elegance that stops short of excess, creating both grandeur and domestic comfort. At the same time, his interior layout and planning often reveal a quiet, modern outlook, a rational circulation, generous access to gardens, and a subtle simplification of ornament. This ability to synthesize tradition and restraint, a romantic atmosphere with practical clarity, made Johnson one of the region's most sophisticated interpreters of the earliest 20th century residential and institutional architecture. Well, Tom, I'm not having any luck with this. Do I need to turn it on somehow? Here's the man himself. Johnson was born in New York in 1882. He studied architecture in Paris and then attended MIT, graduated in 1910. He returned to Pasadena, where his family him, summering in Montecito. And growing up there, there's speculation that these old money connections between both communities brought local commissions his way. His father was Los Angeles's first Episcopal bishop, which may have informed his character and approach. Let's have another one. Oh, there he is. And here he is with his lovely wife on a cigarette break. Oh, that one came up a bit early. Is this my final version? I hope so. That one's out of sequence. Anyways, during college, Johnson trained under prominent architects Myron Hunt and Robert Farquhar, who designed what is now the William Andrews Clark Memorial Library in Los Angeles. If any of you know, it's administered by UCLA and was commissioned by William Andrews Clark Jr. That's the fourth son from the first marriage. So this made him a half-brother of Huguet. He subsequently launched his career in 1912, consistently working even during the Depression. Yeah, this is out of order. This is my earlier submission to you. So we're going to keep jumping ahead. This is some of his earlier work. This is the Miraflores. This is what brought him to Santa Barbara. He was 35 years old, and he began his work in this area with a transformation. This was the original clubhouse of the Montecito Club into the Jefferson residence, which we now know as a music academy. This was one of the most acclaimed houses designed in the Mediterranean style and it was called Mira Flores. He was awarded a gold medal in 1920 from the American Institute of Architects as an example of the most outstanding residential architecture in the nation, the first such recognition for a Southern California architect. And let's go, oh, now we're back in order for the time being. Cuesta Linda was built in 1919 for Henry Gavitt and was created on the former property of Kinton Stevens. This is now Lotus Land, with later additions and alterations by George Washington Smith. Now, this is other work by Johnson. This was the Fleischmann House. I've skipped over these in effect to speed up my presentation. Keep going, keep going. Now, let's see. He partnered with two other architects, Gordon Kaufman and Roland Coate. The firm was responsible for two major churches commissions, All Saints Episcopal Church in Pasadena, which you see here, and St. Paul's Episcopal Cathedral, which his father would consecrate as the bishop. What an honor from father to son to father. Let's go for, I just included some of these other work to show it. This was the cathedral that was commissioned and sadly destroyed in 1928. This is the Harold Chase House in Oak Branch. Harold was the sibling of Pearl. Let's keep going here. The La Valencia Hotel makes you want to check in with that image. This is from 1925, and this was followed by the Biltmore Hotel and the Cate School. And here's the Cate School. Keep going. Oh, never got that one. Oh, and here's Rancho San Carlos. Maybe a few of you have heard of the Jackson family estate for Charles Jackson and his wife, Anne Gavitt Jackson, the daughter of the people who built Lotus Land. This 237-acre, 30,000 square foot house was only listed first time on the market from the family in 2014 for 125 million. It later sold for about 65 million in 1920. Let's keep going. I only wish I could have seen it. So the meeting and the commissioning of Johnson almost certainly occurred in the context of planning or remodeling that quake-damaged original Bellosguardo, but their subsequent professional relationship offers a revealing window into how early 20th century California elites shaped the built environment to express their status, taste, and identity. More than conventional client-architect pairing, their collaboration reflects a nuanced exchange of power and aesthetics. Clark, a wealthy and socially prominent patron, brought specific cultural ambitions and personal sensibilities to the table, while Johnson translated those ambitions into a refined architectural language grounded in European traditions and emerging construction techniques. Examining their partnership not only illuminates the ways in which Johnson tailored his designs to those desires of an influential client, but also shows how Clark's patronage helped define the character of high-style residential architecture in Southern California during this period. So Johnson's work at Bellosguardo represents one of the most fully realized expressions of his architectural vision. At Bellosguardo, Johnson synthesized his mastery of French Revival forms with an unusually sensitive response to the site, the climate, and coastal views. The house's low spreading massing, stone walls, tile roof, these are carefully composed in step with the beach bluff and the vistas of the ocean, while sheltered courtyards, terraces, and loggias knit the interior and the exterior space into a seamless whole. Johnson's characteristic restraint is evident in the controlled use of ornament and the quiet elegance of details allowing proportion, light, and landscape to play the leading roles. In Bellosguardo, his stylistic discipline and his understanding of elite residential life in early 20th century California, these converge, producing an estate that is both personal expression of its patron and a landmark of regional architectural identity. Okay, let's go for another one. Nope, too soon. Characteristics of this northern French chateauesque style of the Loire Valley, and this relates back to Anna's taste and ambition as being of French lineage, speaking French. So just quickly, some of these ideas of chateauesque, they have complex roof lines, projecting pavilions, tall, elaborate chimneys. There's an overall vertical emphasis giving a castle-like appearance. These are of masonry construction, although it's underneath, it's 20th century masonry. So it's reinforced cast concrete, but it looks like it's built out of stone, veneer, as opposed to stucco. Quoins, there's an architectural term for you today. Those are those little blocks on the corners. Then, excuse me, rustication are used to articulate the mass. There's an emphasis on tall, narrow mullioned windows. There's a grand formal entrance. I have some later images of that. There's a symmetry in the plans and facades, but it's broken later on. Let's see, these elements together create a sense of aristocratic grandeur and a vertical castle-like presence that is quite distinct from the low, horizontal, indoor-outdoor characteristics of Mediterranean and Spanish colonial revival estates that are so well known to us in Santa Barbara. Well, let's see what else we got here, Tom. No. These are all come at the end. Yeah, you didn't get my right. So I had some interior shots. The interiors were done by a New York firm called Olive One, who were a prestigious French interior design firm with a significant New York presence. I had some shots of the lighting fixtures, which were done by E.L. Caldwell. Maybe you can find it while I blather on here. Uh, that they were Caldwell did fixtures for prominent American homes, but they were essentially done by 1930. So Bellosguardo may have been their last projects. And to my architectural geek out, even the door hardware and plumbing fixtures are extraordinary. They were done by P.E. Guerin, who are still in business today at their same location in Greenwich Village. Well, we'll see how Tom does here. These talents are combined to install paneling, and this is what Brian mentioned, that originated in the 1700s in Belgium, moved into that New York house, and then subsequently again transplanted into Bellosguardo. And the talents of the interior designers matched together the lighting fixtures, the paneling, and hand-painted ceilings. I would hope that we had somewhere. Oh, here we are. Yay. Yeah. He always comes through, doesn't he? So here's some of that interior carving and paneling. Keep going forward, Tom. One more. Here's some of those incredible light fixtures. On the left is a cast glass fixture. Now, as a whole, all the fixtures look to be like a chess set, but they're individually done for each room. The one on the right is in the entry room, a very formal. Oh, lost it again. He'll get it back. I know we can depend on him. So I've learned that Ozzy DeRoss did some of the stone masonry work. Let's see if you can go to the next slide. Oh, here's that door hardware. Only an architect could geek out. But look at the fantastic detail in not only the hinges, and there are 3 hinges on every door, and every door has an individual lock set. There isn't a master key to the house. This relates to their ideas of security. Let's go to the next one, Tom. Here's that paneling that Brian spoke of from 1700, and this is done from solid walnut panels. There's nothing added to, there's only material been removed. It's incomprehensible to me how they accomplished this in 1700. You can see the painted silk ceiling has an Orientalism to it. Now, there's one image missing here. It's the light fixtures. I guess they're gone. The light fixtures pick up an Orientalism. No, it's not in there, Tom. You'll just have to see it for yourself. But they mitigate the disparate design expressions of the paneling and the ceiling by combining those 2 elements in a masterful way. Let's just keep going here. Here's on the left is the architect's original sketch and how it is pretty much accurately delivered on the right. And let's go for again. This is that entry courtyard that you saw when Brian's, and the back. This is actually my favorite room, the reflecting pool with the original orange trees from 1939. And let's keep going. I think this is pretty near the end. Again, you can see why it's my neighbor room. So I'm just going to wrap up here. There's a stop there at the post office. You may know that his 1936 post office was a byproduct of the New Deal. This is after. Now, while he made a good living in the 20s designing houses in Montecito and Pasadena for the rich, his later work was influenced by his progressive ideals, perhaps influenced by his religious upbringing. These became to fruition in his housing policies and his designs for low-cost housing. And this is one of them that's still in use in Los Angeles. This is the Village Green. During the Depression in the 30s, Johnson moved away from designing for the wealthy as he became increasingly interested in small, affordable housing solutions. He won another award for this project, doing a gardener's cottage for the Chase estate. His public housing work reflected the ideas of low-rise buildings around shared green courtyards, which you can see in this plan. I have a friend who actually is lucky enough to live here. He contributed to our architectural identity with his quality of design. It wasn't a one-trick pony. He adapted to modern building techniques. He was influenced by California's emerging style in his final years. Johnson dabbled with modernism, but never completely abandoned his imprimatur as a classicist. His clients tended to be people of high social standing and wealth. His projects reflected this in both proportion and style. Most of his early work was in English, Anglo-colonial, and Mediterranean style, with special attention paid to the site and its relationship to the building. And just to wrap it up, Johnson's prestige, yes, here he is riding off into the sunset. His ability to work into harmony with historic tradition, the climactic feeling of the area, and the appropriateness of modern needs. A signature of his designs include a mingling of Mediterranean and traditional Anglo-Saxon styles with a congruence between the building site and surrounding landscape. His contribution to Southern California has left us a legacy of place as compared with contemporary signature of self. I think back to his Episcopal upbringing and sense of duty to his community. Thank you. So Brian's going to finish up
Well, thank you. I'm glad you got a glimpse of some of the things in the house. To my mind, this is the most exquisitely built house in our entire area. I've been in some beautiful homes. I've never seen anything built with this quality. It's built at the height of the Depression, 1933 through 1936. The craftsmanship is just splendid. So you're going to want to go to Bellosguardo.org and push the visit button so that you can line up a tour for yourself. Go down there. They do it Wednesday through Sunday, I think 3 times a day, most days, most weeks. Well, this is in the 1930s. Now, oh, we're back already. Wonderful. And as you saw, it's just an amazing place. I'm going to tell you a couple of more things about this family, just in case you're not fascinated enough already. Tell you a couple more things, and then we're going to find out what happened to Huguette. And Thomas Reynolds will provide that. So, Tom? Anna Clark loved music. It was her primary love of life. You know, she was described as elegant, as cultured, fun to be with at a cocktail party. She made some cheeky comments occasionally, which were fun. But go ahead, Tom. You will see at the estate here some of her prized Erard harps. Sebastian Erard was the Antonio Stradivari of harp building 200 years ago. You'll see that. Go ahead. You will also find out that in the discussion of music that the big room in the house, the big featured room in the house, is not a living room. It's not a ballroom. This is not a for show place. This is a beach cottage. This is a place to come and enjoy yourself. If the family went on vacation back on the French Riviera, she would be upstairs playing her harp for a couple of hours. The big room in the house is the music room. And you saw a couple features of that. I told you that they own some rather nice violins. Well, in fact, when Huguette was 50, she would get the La Pucelle, another Stradivarius violin, which sold 20 years ago for $6.5 million. At one point, since Anna so loved chamber music, she had a box at the Met. She would have people come into her apartment on Fifth Avenue and play for her. She would have people come to Bellosguardo here and play to her. Robert Strauss was a world famous cellist, and he was playing for her. She told him, "Oh, Robert, you must start another string quartet." This is like 1948, just after the Second World War. He told her that there was a dealer right there in New York who had 4 instruments, and these instruments had been owned by none other than the violin virtuoso Paganini. In fact, one of these is inscribed, made by my own hand in my 93 years. In my 93rd year, excuse me, Antonio Stradivari. Amazing. She took a picture off of her wall, and it was a picture that Huguette really didn't like. And in fact, the own artist, since it's a picture of his wife, Cézanne's wife didn't like that picture either. She took a picture off of her wall. She had her driver take her down to a dealer, sold it, and the only number that I've heard reported by one of the authors was $200,000. Came back with all 4 instruments, handed them over to Robert Strauss. And at that point, then we had the Paganini Quartet traveling the country. She also bought them a place to stay in Carmel. These people had plenty of money. And what fascinates me is how they lived, knowing that they could do anything they wanted. They didn't get off in drug world. They really stayed on track here. Let's go ahead. Now, Huguette is often shown holding a doll. She had a lifelong fascination with dolls. She would later become just have a marvelous collection. She had an amazing doll collection. It was eventually sold off by Christie's right here at the Baccara in an auction, and we can see that. She had Japanese Hina dolls. She had antique dolls. She would send her assistant down to the Christie's auction to pick up an antique doll. She would also send her assistant down to FAO Schwartz just down the street to pick up the newest Barbie doll. So her doll collection was really rather eclectic. And back in the 1920s, it would not be unusual for a young woman in the 20s to carry her salon doll with her. You're going out for the evening, you're going out to dinner, out to visit people, you take your salon doll along. Today we take our dogs along here in Santa Barbara, but back then it was the salon doll. One other thing, there are a lot of paintings of family members in the house that were done by a famous artist, and that artist is, there we go, Tadeusz Sztyka. Tadeusz Sztyka was a Polish artist, portraiturist. I'm proud of myself being able to say that word, portraiturist. And he was the artist of the stars. You know him for the next picture, which is Roosevelt on the horse in the White House. Next picture, he painted a lot of beautiful women. Next picture, since he was one of the best, and we've got a dozen portraits right down here in the estate house. Since he was one of the best, the family said, well, we want you to be the art instructor for Huguette. Huguette would go twice a week in New York to paint with him, and Huguette turned out to be an amazing artist. Self-portrait here, beautifully done. She did a showing that was very well received. Go ahead. And you will see how meticulous she was in her paintings. She would have fabrics brought in, her father's art galleries would have some Asian art, and we believe that inspired her. She would have fabrics brought in from Japan. She would have models come in. They'd dress up, they'd put on the wigs, and she would work very hard to get it right. Let's see where that one goes. Now, by 1953, Anna's health was failing. Anna was losing her hearing. How sad. She was losing her hearing. It was uncomfortable to travel across country. She was 75 years of age. And, they always traveled by rail. They had these beautiful Pullman cars, and they'd bring their entourage of a dozen people along with them just to take care of them. But she stayed in New York, and she would die then 10 years later in 1963, age 85. She lived a wonderful life. This estate then fell to her daughter, Huguette. Now, from 1953 on, she never came back to visit. This sat empty for years. She would not revisit this for the remaining 60 years of her life. And we don't know. She wasn't a big socialite. She didn't go out much. Go ahead. And we don't really know a lot about her life. We know about some of the things that she liked to do from the people that she was close to. Go ahead. But in the end, we would end up with this estate. And to tell us, so what happened to Huguette, we have Thomas Reynolds. Take us home, Thomas.
Nothing like being the cleanup act after these two guys, huh? I'll make it snappy. So Huguette and her mother lived after the big house was torn down because nobody wanted it. They moved 5 blocks south on Fifth Avenue and had 42 rooms overlooking Fifth Avenue at 5th and 72nd Street, plus Bellosguardo, plus more. But after 1953, as Brian said, they never came back. The house sat staffed, fully maintained, ready, but they never came back. The last 10 years of Anna's life, Huguette took care of her, rarely went out of the house. And then after she died in 1963, she appears never to have gone out of the house again. The 60s, the 70s, the 80s, she lived alone in 42 rooms on Fifth Avenue overlooking Central Park. She never saw people. Nobody saw her. She wasn't entirely reclusive. She did continue to talk to some relatives on the phone. Well, friends, not relatives, relatives of choice, as we like to say. And finally, in 1991, she realized that something was wrong and that she needed help. And so she spoke to a friend who arranged for a doctor to make a house call. He was the first person to enter her apartment in decades. He found an elderly lady in a soiled bathrobe with a towel wrapped around her head. When he saw her face, skin cancer had eaten away her face, leaving her unable to hold food or drink in her mouth. He said, "Mrs. Clark, you must go to the hospital." No, she said, "Set up a clinic in my apartments. Do what you need to do here." He said, no, you must go to the hospital. And she finally agreed on the condition that they take her out in a gurney held over their heads so no one would see her. And they took her to Doctors Hospital on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And fortunately, were able to arrest the skin cancer and repair the damage that had been done. The doctor said to her, "Congratulations, Mrs. Clark, you're healed. You're ready to go home now." And she said, "I don't want to." And so she lived the final 20 years of her life in a hospital room. Not in her 42 rooms on Fifth Avenue, not at her Bellosguardo beach house with 30,000 square feet, not in another house she had in the Connecticut, just in case she needed to get out of the city, in a hospital room with 24-hour nursing care. And she lived on and on and on. And finally, in 2011, 2 weeks before her 105th birthday, she died. And then all hell broke loose. She had refused to write a will for many years. Finally, she wrote 2 conflicting wills, very, very, very distant relatives of the half brothers and sisters, most of whom she'd never known, concerned for their relatives' well-being, showed up to claim part of her fortune. The tax man showed up. She'd been very generous in giving gifts, but no gift taxes had been paid. It became a battle royale in the probate courts of Manhattan. And finally, after platoons of lawyers represented all of the relevant parties, and some perhaps not so relevant, her estate was resolved. And her desire to leave Bellosguardo to become an art center survived, but the money was all gone. And so what we have is a 30,000 square foot house on almost 24 acres of land, 1,000 feet of ocean frontage, and no money. And so if you wonder why it costs $100 a head to see Bellosguardo, now you know. That's what's keeping the lights on and the grounds irrigated. There is a huge opportunity here to create something and a substantial challenge at the same time. So it's been a lot of fun for us and a couple of dozen other docents to begin at long last, after many years of Santa Barbara and saying, what the hell is going on up there? Why don't we get to go in? You get to go in now. Limited tours, 10 people each, only a few times a week. But the veil is beginning to lift ever so slightly. And if you're at all interested in it, and I don't see how you couldn't be after hearing these tales these guys told you, and there's 1,000 more you didn't hear today. This meticulously maintained, perfectly kept, perfectly appointed in the finest French antiques home is available. And I suggest you go now if you're interested, before they have the money to do anything to it. It will change inevitably over time. Perhaps it will be sold off if plans can't be arranged to continue it. But for now, Huguette Clark's legacy lives on at Bellosguardo. We invite you to visit.
Sorry, thanks. We have to be out of here by noon, but we could, if you guys are willing to answer some questions or have, and then if they do this to us, we have to leave immediately, all right? Because normally that's what we're told is we're out of here by noon. So do we have, I already see hands up. All right.
This question,
So what do you want to know? Are you inspired?
I'm very inspired. A fabulous presentation.
Great.
Thank you. I have a question for Dennis really
Great,
fast.
Dennis.
So you mentioned at Bellosguardo, they used reinforced, building materials. Does that mean like modern cinder blocks and rebar, or is it like the old terracotta blocks or what?
Well, it's cast in place concrete that's reinforced. So they actually build a form, put the reinforcing rods in it, and then the concrete. And what you saw in the photographs is really just very heavy wallpaper. Then it's clad with a limestone and a man-made product. So the end result is those walls are anywhere from 12 to 16 inches thick. It's probably the most stable structure in the entire area.
I would like to know if you have been given the privilege of going upstairs and if upstairs is as elegant as the down.
It's quite interesting. The tours run through the 10,000 feet downstairs. There's plenty to see downstairs. The house does not have ADA accessibility at this point. The elevator is not working. It only moves a couple of feet. At some point, that will be open and you'll be able to go through the 10,000 square feet upstairs that only contains 6 bedrooms in 10,000 square feet, all en suite. And Anna's own apartment, bedroom apartment, has a big, I don't know what color, you call that pink marble?
It's a rose granite.
Oh, rose granite, excuse me. Carved out of one chunk of stone, bathtub. You don't want a big rose granite bathtub like that. You had to fill it with hot water, get the stone up to up to temperature, then drain it all out, and then put hot water in so you could take a bath. Am I right? But at some point, we will be able to have tours upstairs as well. Yeah.
And then professionally, I geek out over the 6,000 square foot basement where things are laid out in immaculate fashion. It isn't that usual spaghetti of pipes and no, this is very carefully laid out. I don't think that'll ever be open to the public.
We'll try to do 2 more.
Did William and Anna speak in French?
Yes. Yes. Right.
So he knew French.
Yes. And mother and daughter then spoke in French. None of their staff spoke French, so they could have their own discussions about things and not have the service staff in on those discussions.
Any more? Donna, Alan has you.
I just have one question about his first family. Did they ever have any interest in visiting these houses, or even could they?
Visiting this house, Bellosguardo.
Yeah,
Even gosh, I don't know. Do you know the answer to that, Thomas?
Very, very little connection between the first families. I mean, can you imagine? Here's 4 grown people, and they're told, oh, by the way, here's your new stepmother, younger than you are, and your 2 half sisters that you didn't know existed. Needless to say, there wasn't a lot of close relations between them. But there is some evidence that some more distant relatives did along the way in the heyday of Bellosguardo. We think they came only 14 times between the time it was completed in the 1930s and the 1950s when they last came. There is some evidence that some distant members of the family, in fact, did visit them, but very, very little connection between the families.
I don't like to brag, but my house was just like that in the San Fernando Valley that I grew up in. It was just like that. I know we probably have more questions, but we really do have to get out of the room. I apologize. Please, please give it up for our 3 gentlemen here. Thank you so, so much.
I'd make a final plug. If you're looking for a good book, Empty Mansions, The Mysterious Life of Uget Clark lays it all out and it was written by a journalist, William Dedman, who also, and if you want to take the easy trip to YouTube, gives a talk to our historical museum and lays it all out in a shorter amount of time. So if you're interested, pick up the book or look at that YouTube video.
Let's give a hand to Tom Jevons too. Thank you, everyone.